Good afternoon and welcome. You're tuned in and listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I am your host. My name is Sharona. Hey, thanks for tuning in. We have a big show today. This show is dedicated to Glenn Frey. Sad news in the music and entertainment industry last night with the news of his passing away. Also, sad news today with the news that Dale Griffin, drummer for Mott the Hoople, he's also passed away. Not been a good year for the music and entertainment industry. Last week, Celine Dion lost both her brother and her husband to cancer, and we dedicated a show to David Bowie last week, who also passed away at the age of 69. Glenn Frey was 67. We need to wrap Elton John in bubble wrap and take care of him because your girl Sharona just can't handle one more. Cancer is a terrible disease. We need to find a cure. Why haven't we found a cure? That's a great topic for another show. But this show is sort of dedicated not only to Glenn Frey, but to the NFL playoffs. First up is my chat, with O.J. Spivey. OJ is a Philly guy. He hosts his own radio show there. We sat down yesterday afternoon and had a great chat about the Philadelphia Eagles, their hiring of Doug Peterson, possible hire of Jimmy Schwartz. What's next for them? Will they go to back to the 4-3 defense? And we also talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. Are they always going to suck? We'll see what OJ has to say about that. And then we talk a little music. OJ is a bit of a music head. We talked about Kanye. Is Kanye washed? Sharona says he is. What does OJ have to say about that? Stay tuned in for that in the first hour. Then in my second hour, Russell Baxter will be joining me. I also sat down with him last night. We talked about the playoffs, gave you guys a rundown of what happened in the divisional games, and a preview of the upcoming conference championship games. Always great fun chatting with Russell. Such an encyclopedic knowledge of the National Football League. And then, of course, the final word with Sharona. Stay tuned in for that. What is Sharona going to talk about? Lord only knows. So you're listening to Back Talk with Sharona. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, my chat with O.J. Spivey. All right, welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by O.J. Spivey. O.J. is a guy who he lives in Philly, and he has his own podcast. We're going to talk about that first and talk about, I believe, O.J., correct me if I'm not wrong, but don't you write for Philly.com, or didn't you write for Philly.com?
No, I never written for Philly.com. I just pretty much do a sports talk show here in Philadelphia. Okay. Word on Sports on 900 AM, WURD radio. Cool. So, I have done some writing and blogging in the past, but not currently.
Right. Okay. All right. For some reason I thought that, but I get confused easily, so apologies for that.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm so glad to have you on. So tell everybody out there a little bit about you and about your podcast.
Okay, yes. Our show, Word on Sports, it airs every Saturday at 12 noon Eastern Time here in Philadelphia. And you can also hear the streams online as well at 900amwrd.com. I have my co-host as well, Neil T. He's worked with ESPN, currently works for Nesson up in New England Sports Network. Yeah. So we get together every Saturday and we talk a lot about Philly sports, a lot of national sports as well. So we have a lot of fun every Saturday.
Well, Philly sports is always fun. There's always something popping there. And we're going to talk about the 76ers. Boy, what a mess. But I want to start with some, and by the way, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I want to start with some Eagles talk. I'm a big football girl, and I follow the NBA, although usually I don't get all that. It's such a long season, so many games. I don't usually get all that involved until football's over. Of course, that's when the push for the playoffs is usually starting, and I'm a big Spurs fan, so you can feel free. And I'm not a bandwagon Spurs fan, by the way. I grew up in Texas.
Sure.
So, yeah. So, well, let's talk about the Eagles. Some interesting news this afternoon. I was actually going to ask you about their D.C. situation, and now I'm really interested in it because it sounds like they are interviewing a guy that I like a lot, I'm familiar with, Jim Schwartz, who used to be the defensive coordinator here in Tennessee for the Titans. Let's go ahead and start. I want to ask you about Chip Kelly. In your opinion, what led to Chip Kelly's downfall in Philly?
Well, first of all, I do think Chip Kelly is a good head coach, and I think he can be successful with out there in San Francisco now. But basically what happened in Philadelphia, I think pretty much the players pretty much quit on Chip Kelly, whether it was on the field, not so much on the field, but definitely off the field. There was a lot of rumblings about Chip Kelly's coaching methods, his interaction with players, his relationship with players or lack thereof. And not only that, Chip Kelly's relationship with the Philadelphia Eagles, the front office, the everyday staff. I actually did work for the Eagles for one season during their game days. So they do like to have a family atmosphere with the Philadelphia Eagles, and Chip Kelly really doesn't fit that mold, even though they gave him a lot of all the control as far as player personnel. He really doesn't fit that mold of that family atmosphere. And I think just primarily when you lose the players, you pretty much lose everything else. And his relationships with everyone else in the organization didn't help. And I think owner Jeffrey Lurie just said, enough is enough. I mean, it does go back to winning, of course. When you don't win, that usually heals all wounds because, you know, we have seen teams over the years in every sport win where the coach is not necessarily liked, players aren't necessarily liked, but when you don't win, all that other stuff gets multiplied, and that's pretty much what happened.
You can be an asshole as long as you win. That's just the bottom line.
Exactly.
You can't.
And I'm sure that's why the Patriots put up with Bill Belichick.
That's right.
Because he's an awesome coach. You know, even his former players, Belichick's former players, they really don't say anything bad about him other than saying that he's very demanding, very tough. But you know, when you win, you know, you can be the biggest a-hole in the world. So.
You know, and there's so many others. From talking to people, Coach Belichick is very different in the locker room and very different one-on-one. He doesn't like the media. And Jimmy Johnson's a good example. He was a guy, he was an absolute asshole, but, you know, he was and he could while he was winning, and then, you know, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And
Nick Saban as well in college.
So, And Ken was in Tennessee, and, you know, and we can talk about that, and being an asshole to everyone led to his downfall here.
Great. Your Spurs with Greg Popovich, so it's all through every sport. So,
Although,
as long as you win.
Yeah. Although Coach Popovich, with his players, now he can be an asshole to his players, no doubt, but with his players, he's also a little bit different too. But you can talk about that all day long. Don't get me started on Pop. I think that's right.
There you go.
You know? And of course, Coach Kelly is now in San Francisco with the 49ers. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do. Speaking of which, it's kind of interesting to me that the 49ers fired one guy who was hot-headed and hard to get along with, allegedly, just to turn around. And, of course, they had the very short-lived Jim Tomsula era, and then turned around and hired, Chip Kelly, who, it's not – I mean, Jim Harbaugh is a fiery guy, on the field. You don't necessarily see that. You don't necessarily see that from Chip Kelly, but it is an interesting situation with him, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Chip Kelly in San Francisco is highly interesting for two things. For two things, I think. Number one, what you just mentioned, Sharona, 49ers had a disastrous season with Jim Tomsula as head coach. They mentioned Colin Kaepernick in favor for Blaine Gabbert. I mean, we did find out later that Kaepernick had an injury, and they ended up putting on injury reserve. That was controversial in itself. But the 49ers won. They need a buzz, okay, because they've taken some bad PR. Jed York, the owner, who, of course, Eddie DeBartolo's nephew, took over the team for, Eddie's sister, Jed's mother. They need a buzz this year because they've had such a bad season. And I think Chip Kelly, like him or not, goes to the old cliche, any publicity is good publicity. And I think during these next 2 weeks, especially during the Super Bowl week, you all look for the 49ers to market Chip Kelly and put him in a positive light. And also, number two, Colin Kaepernick. He's thought to be the one. Chip Kelly's thought to be the one to resurrect Colin Kaepernick. I look at it the other way around too. Maybe Colin Kaepernick can probably repair Chip Kelly's reputation. I mean, I guess his reputation can't be too bad. He got hired within a matter of 2 weeks after getting fired. But I think that can go hand in hand, those two reasons, and I think especially the 49ers, they want to become relevant again. They're a storied franchise, historic franchise, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Steve Young, all of those guys. They want to get back to prominence, and I think they're just taking a big gamble with Chip Kelly and hopefully keeping Colin Kaepernick now because I know he has a guaranteed contract from April 1st. So they're looking to have those guys resurrect the franchise.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I agree. Let's talk about the Eagles, though. What was your impression of, why do you think that Chip Kelly traded LaShawn McCoy and wanted guys like LaShawn McCoy and Deshaun Jackson, and they didn't. We could have a debate on how hard they tried to retain Jeremy Maclin. We're not going to have it, but you could have one.
Well, it's a number of things, Sharona. You can point to it. It can come right down to money. Both LaShawn McCoy, he was up for a contract extension after the 2015 season. There was some talk of whether the Eagles were going to re-up him. He did have some guaranteed money coming. Also, too, it goes back to the relationships. Chip Kelly was not not that type of coach who related well to LaShawn McCoy. You can also put in, some arrogance there with Chip Kelly with his college mentality, being as successful as he was with Oregon, dealing with 90 players, knowing that, he could plug in LaMichael James, speaking of one of the running backs that he had before, LeGarrette Blount, he can plug in anyone to his system. And we all know with the NFL, that's not necessarily true. I mean, if you're going to plug another person into your system, you better darn well draft well or get the right player in here via free agency to keep your system going. I mean, people thought that with Chip Kelly having 2 10-6 seasons back-to-back, that he would build on that, not subtract from it. And when he got the control, it seems as if he turned into a madman to where, okay, I'm going to get guys who I want or at least plug in who I think anyone I can plug in to get into my system because it works. It's proven that it works, even though it didn't result in any playoff wins, not reaching a Super Bowl or anything of that nature. He really felt that he could plug anyone to his system. And, that's not just the running back position. That's just about every other position.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think a lot of guys, you mentioned Nick Saban before, you could put Steve Spurrier in that category too. The difference between college and the pros is exponential. And, in the pros, everybody's bigger, stronger,
really
faster.
Is.
Yeah, and some of the things that work in college don't necessarily translate. regardless, they've made that decision. DeMarco Murray, is he going to remain an Eagle or not?
Well, the Eagles are stuck with DeMarco Murray. I do believe that they're going to keep him. That's one of the reasons why they hired Doug Peterson. He's a guy who likes to run the football. You saw that even though he didn't necessarily call plays a lot. Yeah, even though he didn't necessarily call plays a lot in Kansas City, Andy Reid still did most of that. But he's one who thinks run first, ball control offense. DeMarco Murray, he's still guaranteed with the Eagles for the next 2 seasons, so they are basically stuck for him. He makes way too much money to force another team to want to trade for him, which I understand. But I still think DeMarco Murray has a lot left in the tank. I still think he's a great football player, and if used correctly, he could be very successful here with the Eagles.
Do you think that they made the right decision with Doug Peterson? I don't want to say that it seemed like an afterthought, but it did seem like some of the guys that they were chasing got away.
Yeah, the whole process, I mean, I don't want to blame this all on Doug Peterson because he could be a very successful coach.
I
that,
agree.
You know, still remains to be seen. But I question just the whole, as you mentioned, I question the whole process of going about getting the head coach. I also question going after so many guys on the Giants. I mean, Adam Gase, who's now with the Miami Dolphins, you know, former offensive coordinator, he seemed to be the guy at first. But I always say, look, if you really like a candidate, you hire him. You don't let him out of the building if you like him that much, if he was really your first choice. But as far as going after some of the Giants, Ben McAdoo, the offensive coordinator, then Tom Coughlin, I don't know how serious that really was. I wouldn't have hired Coughlin either. I don't know that much about McAdoo to where I would have taken a chance on him. And I really thought that the Eagles really cut off their nose to spite their face with the coaching process, because they didn't interview one defensive coordinator, not one defensive coach. And I think those are some quality defensive coaches out there who would have voted well here in Philadelphia. I mean, for one, you saw yesterday with Sean McDermott, Carolina's defensive coordinator. He's a Philly guy. He actually went to high school here in Philadelphia. He was a defensive coordinator here for a couple of years. He got fired, of course. But, look, fans here in Philadelphia would love to have a Sean McDermott defense, because even when he got fired, the Eagles' defense was 9th ranked in all of the NFL. His unfortunate luck was that he replaced Jim Johnson, who was, revered here as defensive coordinator, and he was part of those 5 championship, NFC championship game defenses here under Andy Reid. So he had to replace him, which was tough to do at the time. But, even when you look at other qualified defensive coordinators around the league, I just think the Eagles should have at least talked to those guys to at least see what they can offer instead of just going on offense. But it was quite obvious that Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, the general manager per se, they wanted to go after our offensive guy all along.
Yeah, it's rather interesting, but the roster does seem to be geared toward the offense, and Fletcher Cox had some interesting comments, and it does seem like with the guys that they're looking at, they could make a switch back to the 4-3, which is really where they've seen the most success. They haven't had a strong defense, but that's where they've had the most success has been in that type of system.
Yeah, and maybe, the reports are today, it's going through the Twitterverse, that Jim Schwartz is in town with the Philadelphia Eagles, and he can possibly be named the defensive coordinator as well as tonight. Maybe that was the plan all along, get an offensive coach and then hire a strong defensive coordinator. And I know that's going to make a lot of fans here feel a bit at ease, saying that, okay, and Doug Peterson can be successful. And even a lot of Peterson's former players and teammates, guys who have played with him, Brian Dawkins, Brian Westbrook, even Donovan McNabb, who was Peterson was his quarterback coach here. for a couple seasons, and then as a rookie, Peterson, held the fort down till McNabb came in. They've all spoken highly of Doug Peterson, his leadership, getting along with players, and they do say former players do have a bit of an advantage as opposed to coaches who've never played the game. So we'll see what happens. But I think hiring Jim Schwartz is a good start, and Frank Reich on the other side, looking to be the offensive coordinator as well. So most coaches, as you see, being successful, you're only as good as your staff, your players, of course, and you have to hire strong staff as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Having a strong staff around you is so important. You mentioned Frank Reich. What do you think about him as the offensive coordinator, and how much responsibility will he carry? Is Peterson, as the offensive-minded coach, going to call plays like Andy Reid?
Well, I think it's a smart move. I don't know that much all about Frank Reich, other than his time being in San Diego, and of course him being a backup to Jim Kelly. I know he's a smart guy as well, quarterback who knows the position, of course. And I think again it's a strong move on the Eagles' part under Doug Peterson, knowing that he has another quarterback. As a coach, as an offensive coordinator, I think he probably will call the plays for the most part for Doug Peterson, and I think it's a good move. So we'll see what happens. The Eagles have gone pretty much to a safe and stable philosophy, going to Doug Peterson. They do want to rekindle the Andy Reid years where they were successful, stable, no Super Bowls, of course, no Super Bowl wins, of course, but the Eagles kind of want to get back to that point. I don't know if that type of ship has sailed as far as going the Andy Reid way, because the league changes every 5 years or so. But again, if he hires a strong staff, that's more on the side of him being successful, but we'll see.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Andy Reid here in a minute with the we weren't going to. I don't want to rehash all the divisional games. I do want to ask you about Andy Reid, but before we get there, I want to ask you, what would be your off-season wish list for the Eagles?
Well, first of all, they have to find out what they're going to do at quarterback. With all these moves with the head coach and the coordinators, it's a high likelihood that Sam Bradford may not return. He's an unrestricted free agent this year. He was very close to Pat Shermer, the offensive coordinator. They've become very close over the season. There's talk that Chip Kelly may go after him in San Francisco. I don't buy that too much. One of the other destinations which will probably fit well for Sam Bradford is Houston. Of course, they need a quarterback. We all saw that with the wild card game against Kansas City. And also, too, that's closer to home for Sam Bradford as well, being an Oklahoman. I think Houston is about an hour or so flight from Oklahoma City, so that's closer to home with him. I know he said he really doesn't want to learn a new offense, but at the end of the day, as you know, when you talk about players, money talks, quality of life, all those things. So they have to decide what they're going to do at quarterback.
And so does a starting job,
Exactly. So, and there'll be some destinations for Sam Bradford. Again, I know Houston is one. Cleveland could be another. I don't know if that's another possibility. I don't know if they want to invest a lot in quarterback. Cleveland, I think, has the number 2 pick. But also, too, along with the quarterback position, the Eagles really have to shore up the offensive line. The offensive line was terrible, especially at the guard position. I know you don't necessarily take guards high in a draft. You usually take a left tackle, but they have to find a way to shore up the guard position.
What's up with Jason Peters?
They're really lacking.
Jason
Peters
infamously taking himself out of a game. And
Yes. Well, that goes back to, let's say, the players quitting on Chip Kelly. I think Jason Peters is still can play at a high level. He suffered from a ton of injuries this year. I mean, if it wasn't one thing, it was another. I mean, everybody harps on him coming out of that one game. There are many other games where he probably played where he shouldn't have played. But you lay it all out there on the line. As a player, he's a gamer, perhaps a future Hall of Famer. I think he could still play, but he does have a high salary cap number. I forget the exact number, what it is for next year. But I think there's still a chance that the Eagles may keep him. He's probably one of the guys that got Chip Kelly out of town because Jeffrey Lurie really respects guys like Jason Peters. He knows he was a perennial All-Pro, perennial Pro Bowler. So I think it's a chance that he stays here. But they still have to shore up the rest of that interior of the line. Maybe you do draft a tackle and move Peters in a guard. I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but they have to go highly with offensive linemen. And you have to remember, too, during Chip Kelly's whole tenure here, Chip Kelly failed to draft an offensive lineman in his 3 years as head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, except for Lane Johnson, his first ever pick. Other than that, he didn't pick any other offensive lineman.
I wasn't a fan of that pick. No offense to him. Anyway, I thought.
Well, Lane Johnson is solid. He's not great, but he's a solid NFL lineman. They probably could have done better with that draft. But then again, who did Chip Kelly draft him, or was it Howie Roseman? That's another question here in Philadelphia. I told my listeners, even though Chip Kelly was fired, the Eagles still have a lot of issues because they put Howie Roseman back into power as the quote-unquote GM, although they won't say he's the GM. He's back in power. He's going to make all the personnel moves. Really, the only great player that Howie Roseman has ever drafted was Fletcher Cox. Other than that, everyone else has been. So, can Eagles fans trust Howie Roseman to pick players in the draft? It's all going to be on him now because Jeffrey Lurie can no longer hide Howie Roseman behind Andy Reid nor Chip Kelly now.
They've got a lot of needs. We'll keep an eye on that. I want to talk about the head coaching hires and diversity, just real quick. It's what happened with Lovie Smith in Tampa. Still trying to figure that one out. It does look like they wanted to keep Dirk Cutter. I'm always mispronouncing his name. Not a fan. Dirk Cutter as in some capacity he possibly was going to leave, and Lovie Smith got the yank. What does the NFL need to do to ensure that diversity does remain a priority? And it does seem to me that black coaches do seem to get the yank far quicker than other coaches. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's no easy answer for it, Sharona. I mean, it's obvious that the NFL needs to take more drastic measures as far as to get minority coaches opportunities. I read an article a couple weeks ago to where it really doesn't start at the head coaching position. It starts at the other positions, especially with coordinator. I mean, you have to, improve the hiring practice for the coordinators because these are the guys who get the job. The offensive coordinators especially, that's number one, and some defensive coordinators. But then again, we do have quite a few minority or African-American defensive coordinators, and they don't get the same opportunities as the offensive coordinator. I don't know if it's, there's a stigma with that where, maybe they're looked highly as coaching defense but not coaching offense. I mean, it's a shame that Hugh Jackson waited this long to get another head coaching job, especially having the success that he had in Oakland, the brief success. They changed management there, and that's pretty much what happened. Also the death with Al Davis. But it's a shame that, we waited till now to get the opportunity. I mean, you look back at Tony Dungy, who was a long-time defensive coordinator in several places, and it took him, let's say, almost 20 years to get his first head coaching job, which is crazy.
And look what happened in Tennessee with their defensive coordinator positions.
Roy Horton,
with Ray Horton. And it happened even before that with Jerry Gray. Both
exactly. And I remember Jerry Gray as a player, yes. He was a fantastic football player, yes. And he got his feet wet as a coordinator, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm shocked that more people didn't call that out. You would never have done. I don't think. I mean, I find it incredibly unprecedented that.
Perhaps I.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Sharona. I'm sorry.
No,
okay.
I was just going to say.
Well, perhaps.
Please go, please.
Okay, no problem, Sharona. No, I was going to say, just to your point, perhaps they need to stretch that. First of all, they need to revise the Rooney Rule, period.
Yeah.
They need to revise it all around and
Uh-huh.
also stretch that to the coordinator positions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at Deuce Staley here with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was the first candidate interviewed by the Eagles, but people here just looked at it, and I looked at it too. It was just, okay, they're just satisfying the Rooney Rule.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's okay, yes. So, and they were talking to him being promoted to offensive coordinator, which I didn't buy. I just thought that was just a token interview, as you mentioned. But they need to stretch that rule to offensive coordinators as well, because that's where the gap is. Because let's face it, these are the guys who are getting hired: offensive coordinators first, and perhaps defensive coordinators second. So something needs to happen in that aspect. And number two, head coaches, the current head coaches, they need to do a better job in marketing their coordinators. I mean, of course, nobody wants to lose staff, especially to your arch rivals, but head coaches themselves, they have to do a better job of marketing these minority coordinators. You look at Andy Reid. I mean, he pretty much pushed Doug Peterson onto the Eagles. He pretty much, he should have been his agent. I mean, they all share the same agent. But, I mean, the way Andy Reid pushed Doug Peterson, there's no reason in the world why, Terrell Austin couldn't have been pushed. Ray Horton shouldn't have been pushed. I remember Ray Horton with the Cardinals when he was their defensive coordinator. He was thought as a hot candidate even then. But something really has to be done, and they have to push that with the NFL owners.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like Terrell Austin. I really, in a way, I don't. Well, shoot, I hate to say that. Let's just put it this way: I like Terrell Austin. It reminds me somewhat of the Todd Bowles situation, another guy that I really liked a lot. And, of course, he finally got his shot in New York with the Jets.
Absolutely.
Boy, what an amazing job he did. His first
year. And it's all about opportunity.
Yeah.
It's all about opportunity. I remember the University of Penn, this was around 10 years ago, dozen years ago, they actually did a study between black coaches and white coaches. And on average, within their first couple of years, the black coaches have fared well record-wise than their white counterparts. I think black coaches ended up averaging 9-7, 10-6, while white rookie head coaches were mostly under 500. So the studies show that if given an opportunity, some African American coaches can succeed in this league.
I think that they're doing a better job with the pipeline. The NFLPA and the NFL a few years ago banded together and formed a diversity program to allow former players and of course Jen Welter, the first female woman to get an internship.
And it should be more females as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that they are working on that. But you know as well as I do that it's an incestuous league full of nepotism, and ultimately,
good old boy network. Yeah.
It is a good old boy
on field
network.
and off. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Let's think about the conference. I want to definitely ask you about the 76ers, and then are you a music head? Listen to a lot of music?
Yes, I am. I try to keep up as much as I can. I'm post 40, but I try to keep up as much as I can. So.
Well, I want to ask you about Kanye and the new collaboration with Kendrick Lamar in a minute.
Yes.
But first I want to let's just touch real quickly on the conference championship games. The NFL, the networks got what they wanted. Tom Brady It's not really a head-to-head matchup because we know quarterbacks they don't go so-called head-to-head against one another. But they got the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, possibly final time that they face one another game in the AFC. Give us your breakdown, your rundown on this matchup.
Yeah, I think it's Brady Manning 17, volume 17, I guess.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yes, but yeah, I understand the hype. I'm a broadcast guy. I'm a broadcast major. Went to school and everything, so I understand the hype with Brady Manning. It's just what CBS wants. I know Nance and Sims are going to just gloat all over this game. But it's going to come down to the two defenses. I mean, of course, Peyton Manning has to play well. Rely on his running game, which was successful in their first meeting this year where Denver ended up winning in overtime. But as you know, Belichick, Brady, the Patriots are going to be ready. It's going to be on the road. Tom Brady has yet to beat Peyton Manning in the playoffs on the road. He's 0-2, once in Indy, once in Denver. But, you got to have to look at it again. The Patriots still have a lot to prove, even though they're the defending Super Bowl champions, with the whole Deflategate and everything. They're going to have a lot to prove, and you give Belichick time to find out what Denver's weaknesses are. I know he's going to try to exploit that defensively, but I think the big thing for the Patriots to pull this off, they really have to find out what Denver does on offense and use that against them. I mean, the Patriots have been great with that over the years. I mean, Denver is playing tremendous defense. Yeah. And it's pretty much what's carried them all year, whether it's been Manning under center or Osweiler under center. The defense has really carried them.
They really missed DeMarcus Ware when he was out. What a great season that guy has had. The old man's still getting it done.
Oh, yeah, he is, and he's an outstanding player. I mean, of course, a couple of years ago, the Cowboys couldn't afford him. Well, they say they couldn't afford him, put him under the cap. But, yeah, he's been a tremendous addition to the Denver Broncos. You add him on with Von Miller. They have excellent play in the secondary with Talib, with Wurd, with Harris. I mean, they really don't have a weakness defensively. So, again, that's why they've carried the Broncos so far. And as long as Peyton Manning doesn't make any mistakes, I mean, it's hard to imagine that we say at this day and age that for Peyton Manning to play within himself. But that's what he has to do because, Father Time is undefeated, of course.
Yeah.
But he played actually exceptionally well the other day, yesterday. His receivers dropped a ton of passes.
So many balls. That was awesome.
Yeah, look, Peyton didn't help the cause by throwing, so many non-spirals, but, had his receivers caught the ball, it may not have been that close, or they may not have, been forced to come back. But as long as Manning plays within himself, relies on the defense, Denver will have a good chance of winning.
I'm not the biggest fan of Gary Kubiak's offensive system. I know that he has this reputation as this offensive guru. It reminds me of Ken Wisenhunt. When you have great quarterback, anyway. You mentioned Tom Brady, and it jogs my memory. The game with the Chiefs, in my opinion, and I love Andy Reid. Don't get me wrong, I do.
Yes.
But that was your quintessential Andy Reid playoff game. And
the clock management, the play calling, yes.
Yeah.
And that's what got tired here in Philadelphia. I mean, fans got 14 years of that. I mean, Andy won a ton of games here. I believe he won 10 playoff games here, 9 with Donovan McNabb, 1 with Jeff Garcia, I believe. But that was what kept Andy Reid from getting over the hump, the clock management, the play calling. That's what kept him from getting from over the hump. And, that pretty much cost him the Super Bowl against the Patriots. We remember that drive with Donovan McNabb, taking the time down the field. Yeah, so, that's why Philly gets a bad rap as far as, fans are concerned. I mean, some of it's warranted, but fans at the end of the day, they just want to win. They just want to win. Philadelphia is one of the few NFL franchises without a Super Bowl win, and it's passionate. Philly fans mean well, but that's why we say, okay, well, Andy Reid was underappreciated here. That's why you saw that Patriots Chiefs game the other day. That's Andy Reid in a nutshell.
I hope you'll come back and we can talk about Andy Reid, Donovan McNabb, and the Philly sports fans. Lord, let me get it out. We don't have time to do that today. So I do want to talk about this next matchup, a matchup that I'm extremely excited about. Cardinals, Panthers. This could be the Super Bowl. I mean, seriously, I think that this is going to be that great of a game.
I think we're going to be treated as fans for another Super Bowl 2 weeks in a row, even though Carolina didn't start out that way.
Yeah.
Seattle almost, instituted a miraculous comeback yesterday. But I think you have two juggernauts here in Carolina and Arizona. I'm a big Cam Newton fan. I want to root for him heavy. I had a friend who lived in Charlotte for a couple of years, so I kind of fell in love with that city. That's kind of like my other favorite city to live in or possibly move to. But the fans there in Charlotte are great. They love Cam Newton, and I want to see him do well. But I also want to see Arizona do well. For Bruce Arians, how can you not love a coach, Bruce Arians? He has that saying, no risk it, no biscuit. I mean, he's come a long way. You talk about someone who can relate to players. I mean, I don't know if I've seen a coach in quite a long time who can relate to his players as much as Bruce Arians is. And, he's one of those guys to where, although he's not a minority coach, I mean, he waited an eternity to get an opportunity to be a head coach here in the NFL, and I think he's making the most of it. You look at Carson Palmer, who has come a long way himself, finally won his first playoff game, and Carolina and both Carolina and Arizona, they're just loaded defensively. I mean, you're going to see a great game from both of those teams because they have great athletes on defense. Arizona has a track meet as far as their receiving core. I'm wondering where they found all these guys at wide receiver. I mean, anytime Larry Fitzgerald is your slowest receiver, and I say that tongue in cheek, of course. I mean, what do they have offensively as far as the wide receiver position? Those guys are pretty fast. It's going to be interesting to see them against, a Josh Norman. It's going to be interesting to see Cam Newton break through that tough Arizona defense. I think you have two great coaches, too. You mentioned, Riverboat Ron Rivera as well. I'm going to root heavy for him. Used to be an assistant here. So, used to be an assistant here with the Eagles under Andy Reid and, of course, played for Mike Ditka in Chicago. So, I mean, it's a great matchup. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. Two of my favorite head coaches in the National Football League squaring off this weekend. I might be there. I'm going to know. Let's see. We're recording this show on Monday and playing it on Monday evening and playing it for Tuesday's show. I should know hopefully by the time this show airs or shortly thereafter if I'm going to be in Charlotte this weekend. I'm so excited about this game. I just can't even. Well, the Cardinals-Packers game was really exciting. I want to talk 76ers just real quick, and then we'll wrap it up with the music talk. The 76ers are so bad. I mean, they are so bad. There's a lot of talk that they're tanking, but if they're tanking, they just seem to be tanking without a purpose. Help us make some sense of this.
Well, for a long time, the past couple seasons, past 2.5 seasons, yes, they have been tanking pretty much on purpose. They really haven't made any bones about it with Sam Hinkie. But now that Jerry Colangelo has come in, he's chairman of basketball operation with the Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, he's already made a couple moves. He brought back Ish Smith, point guard. You've seen the Sixers lately. As of the last couple of weeks, they have improved. I mean, they're still, 4-38, I believe. But they have
4,
improved.
maybe 5 games,
Yes, but they have improved a lot over the past 2 weeks. Although they're not winning games, they're all of a sudden now competitive, which is, I think, what fans want to see at the end of the day. I mean, look, I haven't seen the Sixers game in person yet, and especially as a fan, I mean, I refuse to take my hard-earned money or even to just take the family there because it wasn't good basketball. It wasn't good basketball at all. And if you look at some of the games earlier in the season, had they had a decent guard at the time, they probably would have won. They probably would double their win total. But Jerry Colangelo was in. He's trying to fix this thing. He said it's not going to be overnight. I mean, they're going to still somewhat tank for the most part, but it looks like they have a different plan and a different approach. I mean, there's no guarantees in the NBA that you'll get the number one pick. I mean, you can get it anywhere from number 1 to number 4. But, there's also a lot of luck involved in the NBA as well. I mean, you look back with your Spurs, back when Tim Duncan was drafted almost 20 years ago, the Sixers was one ping pong ball from getting Tim Duncan. I mean, you saw that year. I think they ended up drafting Keith Van Horn or whoever that was. Could you imagine Tim Duncan alongside of Allen Iverson? What would that have been? But the Spurs were lucky to be able to.
Tim Duncan would have sunned him so hard it would have been amazing.
There you go. I mean, it could have changed Allen Iverson's career. I mean, they could have won at least a couple rings together. I mean, Tim Duncan has that pedigree where, he would win anywhere. He would demand winning anywhere.
I love him. But he's my all-time favorite. I love Tim Duncan. I'm a huge. But you're right. It could have changed Allen Iverson's career trajectory. And that, that's just more than anything. And we talk about this a lot in football. Going to the right team, to the right system, can make all the difference in a player's game. In their career.
It certainly can. And then the Sixers, they do have a lot of promise with Jahlil Okafor, even though I don't understand why they don't play him late in games. I think he can be a superstar. Are they going to trade him?
There are people talking about maybe trading him.
Well, there was talk where he didn't want to be here at first. I think he does like it here now. That's probably why he's gotten in trouble a couple of times in the clubs and, trying to drive 100 miles an hour on the Ben Franklin Bridge going to New Jersey. But, that's one of the reasons why they brought Jerry Colangelo in here. Of course, Colangelo was well connected, used to be the owner of the Phoenix Suns, still president of USA Basketball. I mean, he can put a good face on his franchise to maybe convince Jahlil Okafor to want to stay here, not force of trade. I think they like both players, but I think in the long run with both Okafor and Nerlens Noel, I don't think they gel as players on the court. One may have to go. Although I like Noel as well, I think that the Sixers, it would be to their advantage to try to keep an Okafor here, put him with a good point guard or a good shooting guard that can get him the ball and they can work off each other. I think that'll be best in the long run. I don't think the fans will put up with Jahlil Okafor being traded, but, it all depends what they do in the draft. I mean, this coming draft, they have to hit. They could have 4 potential draft picks. Ben Simmons looks like he's the guy, out of LSU who may be the number 1 pick.
Do you trust them to draft well, considering their when we talked about, they had to bring a point guard in because they made a terrible decision at that position in the draft.
Sure.
And Joel Embiid, is he ever going to play? They drafted him with their first pick, 2 years ago?
Well, Joel Embiid, from all what I've seen, all what I've read, he's improving. Apparently, he's healing. He's shooting around with the team at times, although we saw that last year and he re-injured his foot. Of course, you never know with foot injuries. I mean, we know with Greg Oden, I mean, if you want to go back in the day with Bill Walton, when you have a big man with a foot injury, that's usually bad news. I mean, I personally going on record as saying that I don't think Embiid will ever play a game for the Sixers, but I'm hopeful that he will at least see him on the court. But I'm not too optimistic. I mean, seeing is believing. I'm not going to believe it until I see that number 21 in red, white, and blue on the court. So that's still a major question mark here.
Yeah, he's got not just a foot injury though. He's got a back problem too, right?
Yes.
And for a big
but
guy,
the main thing
the
main thing that's kept him off the court though has been his foot.
Yeah.
So back injuries you can tweak a little bit, you can play a little bit with, but the foot is really what set him back.
Yeah. All right, let's talk some music. I want to get your opinion. I listened to. I didn't make it all the way through. Kanye's last single that he dropped, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was awful. I thought Jesus was. I used to love Kanye. I used to think that he was a music, and I think he's still in a lot. I mean, he's a mad genius, right? He's crazy.
Yes,
but I think that
most geniuses are.
Yeah, they are. I'm okay with that. Listen, as someone with quite a bit of crazy in herself, I'm okay with that. But I thought Jesus was subpar, in my opinion, not up to his previous work. The single, and I don't remember what the name was, that dropped a few weeks ago, was awful. His voice sounded awful. I haven't listened to this new one. What are we to make of it? Do you like it? Is he washed or not?
Well, I do like the new single that he dropped with Kendrick Lamar. At this point, I'm more of a Kendrick Lamar fan than a Kanye fan.
I love Kendrick Lamar. Love him.
Yes, I happened to see him in concert 2 summers ago because they had the big Made in America concert here in Philadelphia, which is always good. If you're ever in town during the summer, that's a must to attend. But I'm with you. I kind of like Kanye more when he first released his first couple albums. I thought his first couple albums were classic. But at this point, he seems to be more all over the place now, to me.
Those Kardashians, they ruin everybody. Poor Greg Odom.
Yeah, there you go. I
mean, Lamar Odom.
I don't know what it is.
Lamar Odom is who I'm, I mean, what's up?
Must be the water out there in California. But yeah, he's pretty much all over the place now. I mean, he can put out good music here and there. The single that he has now with Kendrick Lamar, I think that's a winner. I think it's going to be a hit. But as far as Kanye is concerned, I mean, he just has to find his purpose and stay with it. Maybe he's trying too much to reinvent himself all the time instead of just saying what works with him, for him, I would say. But, yeah, I mean, he's just all over the place now. I think sometimes you could just go back to basics. And he could be a genius himself if he just focused on his talent.
Kendrick Lamar, is he that dude now? I mean, he's the dude now, isn't he? Is there anybody?
Oh yeah, he certainly is.
Right now?
I will. It's hard to say now because it's so many that are out there. But I like Kendrick Lamar because he has a purpose. He's talented. He's a good performer, and I think he's one of these rappers who can last a long time. I mean, we could still say maybe, I won't say 20 years, but I'll say maybe 10 years from now, he could still be relevant and put out the same material as long as he doesn't, as I would say, sell his soul to the masses, and he stays true to himself. I think he could be, on top for a long time.
Yeah. I love him. I think he's great. OJ, thanks so much for joining me. I've kept you far too long. Tell everybody out there where they can find you on social media and catch your great podcast.
Thank you, Sharona. It's been a pleasure. Anytime. You can catch me on Twitter at OJ Philly, all one word, of course. And also you can catch my show on Twitter, The Wurd on Sports. That's Wurd with a U, not an O. And again, if you're in town, check out my show on Saturdays, or you can hear the live stream worldwide at 900amwrd.com.
All right. Well, I do appreciate it, and we'll be tweeting. Good Lord, I can't talk today. We'll be tweeting out all of this information. Yes. Thanks again for joining me. Have a great night.
Anytime, Sharona. You do the same. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
shout out to OJ Spivey for joining me in my first hour. Great chat with him. Great resource for Philly sports. Up next is Russell Baxter. Great chat with Russell as well yesterday, last night. Big weekend last weekend. All of the home teams won as opposed to the wild card rounds where all of the visiting teams won. Russell and I talked about that. Talked about what happened with the divisional games. Andy Reid. Really interesting discussion with him and with OJ in our last segment talking about Andy Reid. I like Andy Reid, but at some point you got to figure out what you have and what you don't have, and probably they need to get somebody to help dude with some clock management. It was pretty funny to watch the Chiefs. Ironic, not funny, haha, because I was rooting for the Chiefs. To watch the Chiefs and Alex Smith, the look on his face was funny. Have to huddle up, even though they were running a hurry up, no huddle offense. That pretty much tells you everything you need to know about Andy Reid and his offensive genius. And I do think that he is a good coach, but as they say, the first step is recognition. And maybe, hopefully, he'll recognize that. It does look like the Chiefs have assigned someone to pull his challenge flag out of his pocket during the last 2 minutes of each half, so that he doesn't get that penalty. But it's a great chat with Russell Baxter. We'll talk also about the upcoming divisional games. I'm really excited about the games this weekend. The networks and pretty much everyone else, I think, got what they wanted. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. Will this be the last time we see those two guys? I suppose we'll have to see about that. And the game that I'm excited about, Panthers, Cardinals, two of my favorite NFL head coaches, two of my favorite teams. Hopefully your girl Sharona will be there. I'm still waiting for confirmation on that. So stay tuned to my Twitter page for an announcement. You can follow me, by the way, on Twitter at Sports by Sharona. And then, of course, the final word with Sharona. What's on Sharona's mind? Stay tuned to find out. A bit of a programming note. On Thursday, I will be joined hopefully by the guys from Feels Like 98, a great Tennessee volunteer fan website. Really excited to have them on. Haven't talked about the Tennessee Volunteers in a while. Hopefully we'll talk about Holly Warlick and some of the recent good news on the Tennessee football program. And I'll be joined by Mark Schofield from Inside the Pylon. Very excited to chat with him as well. That website they're doing great work, and you'll see me tweet out a lot of stuff from them. Very excited to sit down with Mark as well. And also I'm going to be joined by Matt Stagner. Matt is a writer for Arrowhead Pride. Great SB Nation, Kansas City Chiefs fan website. They do great work on the Kansas City Chiefs. Curious to get his thoughts on Andy Reid, on their season, on that playoff game. And we'll chat about these upcoming conference games. Maybe get his thoughts on the recent coaching moves as well. Doug Peterson to the Philadelphia Eagles. See what he has to think about that. So really excited for Thursday's show. It'll be a little bit of a super-sized show in light of the upcoming weekend. Again, on Friday I have other things to do, people to see, places to go, so we won't have a Friday show. We'll go ahead and we'll take a quick break. When we come back, my chat with Russell Baxter, so stay tuned in. You're listening to Back Talk with Sharona. All right, up next, my chat with Russell Baxter. You're listening to Bat Talk with Sharona.
All right, welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by one of my favorite people in the world, Russell Baxter. It's been too long since Russell and I have done a podcast together, so I'm so happy that I was able to convince him to come back on. He's such a great resource. He has an encyclopedic knowledge of the NFL and the football stats. So I'm happy to have him on here so that we can talk about those great divisional games this past weekend and some really great matchups in the conference championship games coming up. So, Russell, thanks again for joining me.
Well, you're right. It has been far too long. It's great to hear from you again. And, quite the weekend. We saw 4 divisional games, all decided by 7 points or less. That's the first time that's happened in that round in 12 years, 2003.
The division, the wild card round featured wins by all of the visiting teams. The divisional rounds featured wins by the home teams. It was really a bit of a fluke, wasn't it, that the home field advantage didn't mean that much in the wild card round?
Well, it was the first time. It was not only the first time it had ever happened, Sharona, in the wild card round. It was the first time it had ever happened in the NFL postseason with 4 games like that. It's never happened in the divisional round where all the road teams have won. In fact, under the current playoff format, which goes back to 1990, the only time there was even a losing record by the home teams in one postseason in the division was 2008. And I think it was only the Steelers, who wound up winning the Super Bowl that year, were the only home team to play in the divisional round. Remember, that year was Arizona and Philadelphia in the NFC Championship game. Philly was a 6 seed, Arizona was a 4 seed, and Baltimore was a 6 seed, went to Pittsburgh for the AFC title game. So, very rare. Although, when you take into account that all 4 road teams won last week, that means all 4 teams had to hit the road again.
Right,
and 2 weeks in a row against a well-rested team sometimes doesn't add up well.
Yeah. And I think it really, let me ask it to you this way. Which team do you think benefited the most from having that extra week to rest up and recuperate?
I think it was the Denver Broncos because we were getting ready to see what Peyton Manning was capable of. And you watched him yesterday. Ball fluttered a little. Wind was obviously a factor. But Peyton Manning did something yesterday that he hadn't done earlier in the season, and that's not turn over the football. Yeah. That had been a problem. Remember the 17 interceptions? Remember the last time he started a game was at home against Kansas City, and threw 4 picks in that game. He came in relief 2 weeks ago against the San Diego Chargers. And listen, this Bronco team is different than Peyton Manning teams, okay? Even when they won this Super Bowl in 2006, they were, pretty wide open, balanced offense. And then they got to the postseason and they stressed the run. This is a Denver team that's tried to stress the run all year, and obviously they have the top ranked defense in the league. I mean, think about that. 2 years ago, Peyton Manning was at the helm of a team that scored the most points in one season in NFL history, 606. This year, he's at the helm of a team, and he hasn't even been at the helm all year, that gave up the fewest yards and the fewest passing yards in the league. The Denver Broncos this year only scored 355 points. That's 110 less than the New England Patriots this year.
It's crazy. Well, let's talk about that game last in our roundup of last weekend's action. We'll start with the Chiefs and the Patriots. I had a chance to talk to a Philly guy who hosts a radio show there for this same podcast, and we were talking about this game. I love Andy Reid, but this really was kind of a quintessential Andy Reid playoff game.
Well, it was actually a quintessential Andy Reid postseason game against Bill Belichick, because the last time we were so upset about Andy Reid and his team's clock management was Super Bowl 39 when he was with the Eagles and they played the Patriots. It was almost like deja vu. Yeah. They wasted an awful lot of time.
They did.
And especially toward the end there. And listen, you can say all you want about their offense. Their offense was probably about as standard as it was this year. But one thing the Kansas City Chiefs were great at this season and much improved around the NFL, Sharona, was the ability to get to the quarterback, which they were good last year and they were just slightly better this year, but the takeaways, a big part of the Kansas City Chiefs. Last year, they had 14 takeaways. This year, they had 29, and then 5 more against the Texans. No takeaways against the Patriots. In the regular season, 47 sacks, I think 4th in the league. 3 against Brian Hoyer in the wild card game. No sacks against the Patriots. The way you're not going to beat New England anywhere, not sacking, not pressuring Tom Brady. And yet it was interesting because at the very end, New England, maybe in a holiday mood, decided to throw the ball. Ball deflected, wound up in the hands of Julian Edelman as it turned out. But could you imagine if that ball went the other way? We'd be talking about that for 30, 40 minutes on your podcast.
Yeah, the bounces definitely seem to go the Patriots' way, as they often seem to do. It can be maddening, if you're rooting for the opposing team, I suppose. You mentioned the lack of urgency. I felt like that was one of the biggest reasons why the Chiefs lost that game. They just did not seem to have a sense of urgency. Yeah,
and it was funny because they ran the ball on New England. Alex Smith made one of the more spectacular pass plays. They were having trouble with covering Jeremy Maclin. He got hurt and so on. That was almost a typical Alex Smith game as well. They ran a lot more plays than the Patriots did. But for some reason, they decided not to run so many when it counted most. And inevitably, it cost them.
Yeah, it really did. The Patriots seemed to kind of recover from their end of the season doldrums. They were definitely, clicking on all cylinders. They got into a really good rhythm. It'll be interesting to see how they're able to carry that. They have to go to Denver, as I recall, right? And
for the second time this year. And remember, they were 10-0 when they went to Denver earlier this year and lost their first loss of the season.
Yeah, that's going to be a great game. We'll talk about that when we get to the conference championship games. Packers-Cardinals, to me, this was the best game. They were all good games, don't get me wrong. This was the best game of the weekend. It was so exciting. I love both of these teams. Give us your thoughts on that, and what you feel like the Cardinals did to ultimately win that game, besides winning the coin toss.
Well, they overcame some of their own issues. Carson Palmer was sacked 3 times, 2 picks, threw a terrible pick in the end zone, and yet hung in there, gave up the lead on the last play of the game, sent it to overtime, and yet still got some breaks. They got the deflected touchdown pass to Michael Floyd in the end zone, and then Carson Palmer with a little bit of improv found Larry Fitzgerald in overtime, then a shovel pass, and they escaped. And a lot of people talking about Carson Palmer having a rough game. Well, this was the first time. It was the first playoff game for Carson Palmer in 6 years.
Yeah.
It also was the first time Carson Palmer ever played the playoff game off a bye week, so he might have been a little rusty as well. Give Green Bay credit. They hung in there. They had their own rough year and a rough stretch and so on, but Arizona was the better team all year. And you got to also give them credit on defense. They played pretty well without Tyrann Mathieu, without Corey Redding, without Alex Okafor. Bruce Arians has pushed all the right buttons, and here they are with a chance to go to the Super Bowl for the first time since 2008.
A lot of criticism for Uncle Bruce, as I like to call him, one of my favorite coaches in the NFL, for not running it, instead choosing to pass it on second down toward the end of the fourth quarter. But this is who Bruce Arians is. And, if you've got an offensive philosophy, you should stick to it, I suppose.
Well, they were aggressive all year. They obviously felt they could make a big play there. So, yeah, I understand it. And it's easy to tell somebody to pull back the reins like that.
Yeah.
Very easy. But, what was the bigger issue? Their play calling or the fact they let Aaron Rodgers complete a pass for 60 yards on 4th and 20, and then a Hail Mary. That, to me, was the bigger issue.
That was it was such a crazy play, and they came out today and said that the plan had been for Patrick Peterson to knock that down. Instead, he went for the big play, and that's kind of how that that went down. It was definitely an exciting game, and the Packers had, you're right, they had an interesting season. Seahawks, Panthers. Panthers jumped out on front. It was 31-0.
31-0 in the second quarter, and we've seen this out of Carolina a couple times this year. Most notably against the Giants, they were up 35-7, allowed the Giants to tie the game. Then they found a way to win it. This time they found a way to hold on. They ran the ball against Seattle, which the number one run defense in the league. They ran it against them up in Seattle earlier this year. Their forte is running the football, and they'll do it whenever they feel like doing it. And I think they just felt confident enough. But they've had games, against the Saints, they gave up 38 points. They gave up 35 to the Giants. So, you also got to give Seattle a little credit. I mean, they're the two-time defending NFC champion. They weren't going to go down without a fight. Yeah. And even though they got off to a rough start,
Yeah,
but they're very
fantastic.
The second half of the year, and they're more Russell Wilson driven than running game driven. And here's what people think about this: in Russell Wilson's last 4 playoff games, he's thrown 8 interceptions.
Yeah, that's a pretty crazy stat, and uncharacteristic for him because he's usually pretty careful with the football. The Panthers play a lot of zone coverage. They play a lot of cover 3. I'm not a big fan of the prevent defense. To me, the only thing it seems to do is prevent you from winning football games. Do you think that they'll deviate from their philosophy in this next game?
Well, I just think they're listen, they were banged up at the corners yesterday. I mean, Josh Norman obviously played, but they don't have Peanut Tillman, and they're a little beat up at that cornerback position. And Seattle's wide receivers never get any credit. And Seattle's wide receiver core changed dramatically this year with the addition of Tyler Lockett, who that kind of speed. And remember, he kind of kickstarted the second half with the kickoff return as well. So, I mean, they're better offensively. They're not as good defensively. Yeah, I mean, they held Carolina under 300 yards yesterday. But, they're always, for some reason, a different beast on the road. And, Carolina's front dominated their offensive. I mean, lost in the whole thing was Russell Wilson got sacked 5 times.
Yeah, that's pretty. Well, Seattle's offensive line, they're definitely going to have to address that in the offseason. That's a huge concern for them. You mentioned Marshawn Lynch, very much an injury-plagued season for him. It looks like he is done, possibly done in Seattle. What do you think is next for Marshawn Lynch?
Well, I mean, first things first, and see if they do part ways with him and so on. But I think it'll just depend on the coach and the system. And when you think of former Seahawks right now, you probably think of Atlanta with Dan Quinn. You always trying to go with the connections and so on. Although they've got Tevin Coleman and they got Devontae Freeman, and Freeman was one of those 1,000-yard backs, even though he got hurt this year. So. I'm sure somebody would like to bring him in and as a starter if he's got anything left. I mean, he's got some miles on him as well. So, and he can be, as we know, he can be Marshawn Lynch. So that all will take, play a part in where he winds up if and when, the Seahawks cut him loose. But he probably still has some good years left in him. Granted, he can stay healthy.
A lot of talk about maybe him going to Dallas. I could certainly see Jerry Jones making that phone call if he does, part ways with Seattle.
Well, it's possible. I mean, listen, Darren McFadden had a pretty decent year for them, and so on. And Dallas is just such a hard team to get a gauge on. Obviously, they're coming off a year where they played 4 different quarterbacks and got 4 wins out of it.
Yeah, crazy situation there. They're going to have to get somebody to develop behind Tony Romo. Is this going to be the year that they do it? I suppose we'll see. But it's time. I had said few weeks ago on this podcast that RG3 might be a good guy to go there.
Well, it's possible. Listen, depending on, you get Scott Linehan, who's the offensive coordinator there. The thing about Dallas, though, is their offense is built around the offensive line, okay? So depending on what do they want a drop-back passer? I don't know if RG3 necessarily fits the bill there and so on. And listen, I think they're hoping Tony – the problem with RG3 in bringing him as a developmental quarterback is he's already been in this league 4 years. It's almost like you want to spend a higher draft choice if you like somebody and groom them. Much like Tony Romo, who was signed by the Cowboys as an undrafted free agent in 2003 and then basically sat on the bench for about 3.5 years.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And not just Tony Romo, but you can see that up in Buffalo with Tyrod Taylor.
Absolutely. Listen, if you're going to bring in RG3 to Dallas, you're in essence kind of saying you're replacing Tony Romo. I don't think the Cowboys are headed in that direction.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting offseason for them. Hopefully you'll come back and we can talk about some offseason moves.
Absolutely.
Let's go ahead and finish up with Steelers-Broncos. We sort of touched upon it a little bit with Peyton Manning. It really was a credit to the Steelers what they were able to accomplish with Big Ben banged up, the loss of Antonio Brown, and, of course, they were already without Le'Veon Bell, and they didn't have D'Angelo Williams.
Yeah, and, it was funny. Somebody asked me, what did you learn about the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday? And, Sharona, the first thing came out of my mouth was, wow, they have another good wide receiver in Sammy Coates, who was their third-round pick from Auburn. He stepped in. You saw him a little during the preseason. You saw him yesterday. Big play the first time he touched the ball. Martavis Bryant was terrific. They had the big mistake yesterday. Toussaint fumbled the ball just when it looked like they had the momentum. They played very well despite all their shortcomings. And by the way, some of their shortcomings, as you know, were not injury-related as well. Martavis Bryant was suspended the first 4 games. Le'Veon Bell was suspended the first 2 games. So some self-inflicted wounds as well. But I think they're a team that looks like they're headed in the right direction. And I think, they'll probably address cornerback somewhere. That seems to be their weak spot. Their front seven looks very young and very fast. And I think that was a big problem for the Broncos yesterday. And then I think eventually fast got a little worn down thanks to Denver's running game and offensive line.
Yeah, I think that they're probably going to need to address that secondary sooner rather than later. You mentioned Sammy Coates. He was a guy that I had taken some late-round flyers in some particularly deep fantasy football leagues. He definitely was an intriguing young guy. Another guy who had some off-the-field concerns. And, of course, we haven't heard anything, negative about him in the NFL. And they've also got another guy, Marcus Wheaton. He's pretty darn good, too.
Oh, absolutely. And listen, it's funny. Remember, Darius Hayward-Bay was a guy who was, the 7th pick in the draft a few years ago, kind of washed out in Oakland, got a chance in Indianapolis, didn't do much. He's been a nice addition for the Steelers as well. But, they are – the Pittsburgh Steelers used to be the king of the linebackers. Right now they're the king of the wide receivers.
They really
are. Credit Denver what they did. After that, what people missed, I think, or some people missed, was the fact that after they got the Toussaint fumble, Denver had the ball for the next 6 minutes and 52 seconds. They had a 65-yard drive on 13 plays. They really took the steam out of the Steelers in doing that. Pittsburgh, who basically led the entire game after, once they got the lead down 6-0, and looked like they were in control of that game. I think they sapped the life out of them with that drive. That defense looked pretty worn down.
Yeah, you mentioned Denver's defense. I've been raving about him. I'm going to rave about him some more because I love the guy, and we talked about Dallas earlier. DeMarcus Ware, what a great season he had. Now, he missed some games because, he got but still, just a fantastic year for him. And Ole Man football had a pretty good season. We didn't really talk much about the Larry Fitzgerald spectacular ending to the Green Bay game, but I like to see guys like that. The good guys do well.
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, Larry Fitzgerald has played in it a little more than a handful of postseason games. He's always come up big. But, on a personal note, I thought his best postseason moment on Saturday night was wishing my good friend Chris Mortensen well.
Yes.
As you may or may not know, I've known Mort for a long time, worked with him for a long time, and you felt it all over the league this week.
Yeah.
Every game you watched, every pregame show you watched, everybody talking about Mort as he battles stage 4 throat cancer. And as someone asked me today, I said, don't worry. You'll be hearing from him. Don't worry.
Yeah, everyone certainly does wish Chris Mortensen the best, and that was a great moment. You're right, and it's certainly nothing surprising that Larry Fitzgerald would be thinking, of others instead of himself. I was literally on my feet, screaming at the TV, wanting him to score on that fantastic, play.
Yeah. Well, it was a great play by Carson Palmer, as we said earlier, Sharona. He did not have a great game. I think there was maybe a little nervousness, maybe a little rust.
He was nervous,
et cetera. Again, it's funny. Carson Palmer's been in the league since 2003. Didn't play his rookie year, so it's now 2015, and was only his third playoff game.
That's amazing.
So, right, and actually. You can almost say it was really his second playoff game. If you remember what happened in his first playoff game, which was 10 years ago, blew out his knee, hit by Kimo von Oelhoffen, threw a 66-yard pass, I think it was, to Chris Henry. So it's been quite the road for Carson Palmer, and we're going to talk about some awards, I think, a little later, and his name is certainly going to come up.
Yeah, I was so happy for him, and you're right. Although, if he hadn't gotten injured last year, they definitely would have been in the playoffs and, possibly even in the Super Bowl. So I'm super happy for him. Let's go ahead and talk about the conference championship matchups, and then we will get to year-end awards. Patriots-Broncos, give us your breakdown of that game.
Well, listen, I know Dante Hightower got banged up in the game, but I saw what Denver was able to do to New England in terms of running the football. That was also a game with Brock Osweiler, in which New England was up by 14, wound up losing the game in overtime, 30-24. They gave up the big run in overtime. Listen, Denver, this is a different Denver team, as we said earlier. This was a team that set a record for points scored in a season 2 years ago, okay? And now they're the number one defense, and the quarterback has been an issue for them because of his injuries and his age and all that, but the one thing that Peyton Manning has done a good job of since he got back into the fold, which was, late in the San Diego game, and then this week, he's been careful with the football, okay? And that's the key here, okay? I mean, you saw that Pittsburgh-Denver game yesterday. One turnover by both teams, and the one turnover turned out to be extremely costly.
Yeah.
So that, to me, this falls on Denver's offensive line, which was a bigger question mark going into the season, Sharona, than the quarterback was. Okay, so it seems like they're better there. Gary Kubiak knows how to run. This is a difficult place to play. I know New England's the defending Super Bowl champion. If I'm New England, I cover Rob Gronkowski with 11 guys. Okay, maybe even throw a couple other people as well. And by the way, don't be surprised if you see Aqib Talib on Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah.
So I like Denver in this game. I'm guessing that one or the other game, and by the way, we got the 1 and 2 seeds in both conferences for the first time since 2004. I get the sense one or the other of this game is going into overtime. I haven't made up my mind which one, but I'll take the Broncos at home.
Okay, I like it. Cardinals-Panthers.
Well, again, the 1-2 seeds. Again, I flash back to last year. As you will remember, these teams played in the wild card game. Carolina got the win, went on to play Seattle. Of course, there was no Carson Palmer. It was Ryan Lindley. And when it was all said and done, the Arizona Cardinals totaled 78 yards of offense. That is the fewest yards by any team in NFL history in a postseason game.
It's amazing. It's amazing that Houston didn't get that record with their playoff appearance this year.
Yeah, no, they tried. They were able to at least run the ball. I mean, the Cardinals were so inept. And again, they were down running backs. They were. It was Scotch tape and glue for Bruce Arians at the end of the year last year. There's no question about that. But here's my prediction for this game: there will be at least one play by the Cardinals that covers 78 yards on offense, just because of irony. But it won't be enough, because I just think Carolina finds way to win. They're the one team in this league that not only has offensive playmakers, they have defensive playmakers. Luke Kuechly, Thomas. Yeah. Think about Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis yesterday. One guy returns a pick six. The other guy is on the hands team, Thomas Davis, for the onside kick by Seattle. So you have to like what you see. It again. Carolina's won 12 straight games at home, including the playoffs. It's funny. You've got the NFC, where the two teams, Arizona and Carolina, have combined to go to the Super Bowl twice, and then you have the Broncos and the Patriots, who combined to go to the Super Bowl 15 times.
That's crazy.
So, but I think we're going to see the number ones again. I think that'll be the third straight year. And that'll be Denver and Carolina.
Yeah, it does. The Panthers certainly do seem to find a way to win at home, and you're picking both home teams, so that home field advantage. We'll see if that still sticks. Let's go ahead and talk about year-end awards. I didn't put MVP on our notes. Is Cam Newton your MVP?
Yeah. And I think the reason for me is, and to me, it's for most of the year it was a three-man race. Okay, Cam Newton, Tom Brady, and Carson Palmer.
Yeah.
But by the end of the year, Cam. The thing that impressed me most about Cam is he got better as the year went on. He had come into the season never throwing 5 touchdown passes in a game. He did it three times in the span of 5 weeks. 35 touchdown passes, 10 rushing touchdowns. Clearly the leader of the game. He should get MVP just for handing out footballs to the kids.
Oh, no doubt.
But let's keep it on the field. Yeah. I think he was the most valuable player. He epitomizes this confident Carolina team who, it's been. Think about this. This was a team at the beginning of last year that was 3-8-1. And since then, they are 20-2, including the playoffs.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. All right, so let's talk about Offensive Player of the Year. Who is your Offensive Player of the Year? And, I don't know. What do you think? Should we limit this to just regular season, or should we include
Well, no, it is regular season. The awards that are given out by the Associated Press are regular season.
All right.
Okay, so, and that's how I don't vote for the Associated Press. I know people who do. Okay. But I look at it as a regular season award, and although we had quarterbacks who had great years, I'm going to go a little off the board as far as the Offensive Player of the Year, and I'm going to take Antonio Brown, the wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know Julio Jones had as many catches. I know Julio Jones had slightly more yards, but you look, he was literally uncoverable at times. He had a game where he caught 16 passes and another game where he caught 17 passes. Remember, last year he became the first Steelers player in history to lead the league in receptions and receiving yards. This year he tied for the league lead in receptions. And you're talking about a guy who had 129 catches last year, Sharona, which was the second highest total of all time. And he wound up with 136 this year, and basically about 200 more yards. Again, I don't like to do the speculation game. He did this basically with 3 different quarterbacks this year.
Yeah,
but
crazy.
Watching what he did, maybe the Denver was really something. And remember, yesterday they didn't have him, but when they played the Broncos in Week 15, 16 for $189 and 2 touchdowns. Yeah. He burned Chris Harris, a Pro Bowl corner, who had not given up a touchdown pass in a couple of years. So a lot of great candidates, but I'm going to go Antonio Brown as the Offensive Player of the Year.
No, I completely agree, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Chris Harris is fantastic, and he did. He had a fantastic game on him. Defensive Player of the Year is it J.J. Watt,
Yeah, it is. It's funny. Last year he had 20.5 sacks, but Justin Houston had 22. But remember, last year he had all those other defensive plays and some offensive plays. This year they asked him to do different things. Houston wound up third in the league in offense. He wound up leading the league with 17.5 sacks. Yeah, I mean, and listen, it was not a great year for defense in this league. Listen, and trust me, when the ballot comes out and we see all the voting, don't be surprised if there's like 2 or 3 Carolina Panthers on there, like Josh Norman, like Thomas Davis, like Kawan Short. But I'll lean Watt slightly in not what I would call a great year for defense around the league. But then again, that's how the rules are right now too.
You know, it's going to be interesting, but I think he's going to probably win it. If nothing else, just for pure name recognition, and you know, he's definitely one of the best defensive players of this generation. I don't think there's any question about that. Offensive Rookie of the Year.
We saw some flashes from Amari Cooper. We saw some flashes from Todd Gurley. But after a slow start, he had quite the finish, and that was Jameis Winston, the quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We saw some moments, obviously, from Marcus Mariota as well. Gurley was one of the few 1,000-yard rushers in the league, and remember, he got off. We didn't see him early in the season. Amari Cooper was the only rookie to get 1,000 yards receiving this season. But Jameis Winston wound up throwing for over 4,000 yards. The Bucs offense was 5th in the league in terms of yards gained. And Winston, who got off to a very sluggish start. Remember the Week 1 game where they lost 42-14 at home to Tennessee? There were all, and you do this knee-jerk reaction society we have now. Oh, they took the wrong guy. Mariota should have gone one. When it was all said and done, Marcus Mariota had a very respectable year, but Jameis Winston had a very promising year, and I'll take Winston.
See, I would pick Marcus Mariota because I think that when you consider what Mariota had to work with versus what Jameis Winston had to work with, and statistically, Marcus Mariota's numbers are better than Jameis Winston's, and I just think it's important. And of course, he did miss I don't know what two games maybe. I think that does hurt him.
There's no doubt about it. And probably, if I had to guess, he'll get some votes. I think Gurley will get some votes. I won't be surprised if Amari Cooper is the one challenger to Winston in terms of Rookie of the Year. Winston he started all 16 games. That's a big plus. Amari Cooper faded a little, but he played all year as well. But not playing all 16 games, it's not an official tiebreaker, but it certainly doesn't help your cause.
Yeah, I don't think it helps your cause, and it certainly doesn't help his cause that the Titans only won 3 games. So, that also hurts him too. What about Defensive Rookie of the Year?
Well, I'm going to go, again, very obvious to me, is Marcus Peters, the cornerback for the Kansas City Chiefs, tied for the NFL lead with 8 interceptions, had another one in the wild card game, a ton of passes knocked down. He was a big listen, last year Kansas City had 6 interceptions as a team. He had 8 alone this year. That's almost a big time, enough said. We saw some other promising rookies at time. I'd like Leonard Williams, what I saw with him with the Jets on occasion. But I think from stem to stern, Marcus Peters was pretty impressive.
I meant to ask you, Defensive Player of the Year, did you consider Aaron Donald?
Absolutely. And he could very, very, very well win it. I mean, I didn't list all the people that I would, put in there and so on.
I was just curious.
It's hard to ignore, what he did. Listen, Khalil Mack had a tremendous year for the Oakland Raiders. He changed their fortunes on defense. They didn't have a winning season, but they were a much improved football team. So, listen, Tyrann Mathieu for the Arizona Cardinals. There's somebody else. So, I mean, to me, like I said, it was not a great year for defense in the league. Even Aaron Donald had his moments, but then again, sometimes the Rams were an erratic football team, and sometimes even on defense. So, it's that, I think, of all the awards that come out, Sharona, I think that one's going to be the one that's the closest.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. What about Coach of the Year?
Oh, I think I like Ron Rivera, okay? Yeah. I mean, I think Mike Zimmer is certainly somebody you have to look at. A team that dethroned the Packers 7-9 to 11-5. Ron Rivera. Listen, they lost one game all year.
I know, that's crazy.
So that's kind of hard to ignore. And remember, when it's all said, listen, I know they won the NFC South last year, with a 7-8-1 record.
Right.
So they more than doubled their wins from a year ago. They went from 7 to 15. Okay?
Yeah.
So I think you have to look at that. And they had their own early issues as far as changes go, offensive line, losing Kelvin Benjamin. There's always a lot of candidates. Coach of the year a lot of times, as you know, winds up coming down. It's almost like it's the most improved team, whether that's fair or unfair. Okay, I mean Andy Reid will probably get some votes. A 1-5 team that then finishes 11-5. I think Mike Zimmer will certainly get some votes. Somebody might even vote for Jay Gruden. I mean that was a team that won the NFC East after 4 wins last year. So it almost turns into the most improved team. But by the way, if Rivera wins it, the last 4 NFL head coaches of the year would have been Bruce Arians, Ron Rivera, Bruce Arians, Ron Rivera. And guess who's facing each other in the NFC title game this week?
That's pretty crazy. Well,
Bruce Arians and Ron Rivera.
Those are, and I like Mike Zimmer too. 3 of my favorite coaches in the National Football League. Comeback Player of the Year. Is there any doubt?
Well, sadly.
Oh,
okay. No. Let me finish what I want to say first.
Okay.
Sadly, there's a lot of candidates this year. Okay, and for me, comeback player of the year, I know some, like Phillip Rivers got it a couple of years ago because he didn't have a great year. For me, comeback player of the year is overcoming adversity.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm kind of torn because you have somebody who was hurt last year, missed 10 games, came back and had an amazing season. And then again, you have a young man who overcame, cancer. And comes back, makes the Pro Bowl again. So I'm kind of leaning slightly to Carson Palmer of the Arizona Cardinals. With Eric, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, because we've seen co-MVPs. I'd be shocked if a lot of people split their votes. The AP. And if you were asking me and I was a voter, I think I would probably split my vote between Eric Berry and Carson Palmer because they're 2 different sets of circumstances. There's no wrong answer. I mean, but, think about Derek Johnson from the Kansas City Chiefs got hurt on the first play of the season last year and then came back. Danny Woodhead got hurt when he came back and had a good year. That's what I mean. The sad part about this award is there were 2 damn many candidates this year who bounced back, and that's the sad part, So it's not a cop-out answer. I think it's actually hopefully a good answer. I think I'd split it between Palmer and Berry or Berry and Palmer.
It's a good answer. There's no, as you said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's your opinion. It's your vote.
Yeah. Right. And remember, the AP awards are not like the Pro Bowl. It's 50 voters make up a board. It's not a popularity I mean, you could say it's a popularity contest, but it's not like the Pro Bowl where you have 1/3 players, 1/3 coaches, and 1/3 fans. There's no fan vote when it comes to the Associated Press Awards.
Yeah, that's true too. Real quick, I know you got things that you need to do. Coaching moves. Who are your best and worst fits?
Well, I did a piece for Bleacher Report this morning in terms of, and we're still sorting out the coordinators, but as far as the top head coaching move, I go with Dirk Cutter down in Tampa Bay. I didn't like how it was handled by the Buccaneers letting Lovie Smith go after they went from 2-14 to 6-10. They did lose their last 4 games. I understand that. But to me, the reason Dirk Cutter is the head coach of the Buccaneers is because if he wasn't promoted, he was going to be a head coach somewhere else. He had a short stint with Matt Ryan in Atlanta and did good things for him. He was in Jacksonville a couple of years before that. So for me, the Buccaneers who are going to ride Jameis Winston around here. I mean, at least for a couple of years until they can fix their defense. And by the way, they don't. They're looking for a new defensive coordinator. Leslie Frazier was let go. So to me, I like that a lot. And then you get into the coordinators, and everybody's interviewing. It's hard to not like a move right now because there's so much else to sort out. The one thing I will say though is Chip Kelly's in San Francisco, and that's not a bad move, strictly based on the fact, Sharona, that they have a general manager.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. For what it's worth, and depending on how you look at that situation. I don't like Dick Cutter. I'm not a big fan of him. We'll see how that works out. I think if Jim Schwartz is hired in Philadelphia, as it does look like that seems to be taking place or possibly taking place tomorrow, I'm going to really like that move a lot.
I would too. Once again, you're asking me as of right now.
Yeah,
so, and as you see, I mean, listen, there were stories bouncing around today of Ray Horton was staying in Tennessee, or was he interviewing with Cleveland? Exactly. So it's like up to the moment. Okay. Yeah. So, but I think people forget Jim Schwartz had his ups and downs in Detroit as a head coach, but then he went to Buffalo as a defensive coordinator, and they were tremendous.
Yeah.
Okay, and that means the Eagles would probably go back to a 4-3.
Right.
They've already got some. Yes, they've already got some promising defensive linemen there as well. Anyway, with Fletcher Cox and so on. So that would be an excellent hire. I agree if that's the case. But as of right now, I'm going to lean a little Dirk Cutter, even though great minds don't agree all the time. So
how are you liking Brian Schottenheimer to Indianapolis?
Well, I mean, Clyde Christensen is going to be the offensive coordinator there. So, if Brian Schottenheimer, correct me if I'm wrong, they're thinking about him as what, quarterbacks coach?
I'm not exactly sure what role he's going to do.
Yeah, no, but I mean, Clyde Christensen is the rumored hire to be the new offensive coordinator with the Colts. Okay, so I don't know what Brian Schottenheimer would necessarily do. But I'll tell you this, if he can teach Andrew Luck not to turn over the football, he'd be worth the hire.
Well, yeah. And Brad Childress to Kansas City, do you like that move?
Well, I mean, that just kind of, that's a promotion. That's Andy, keeping things in-house and so on. Losing Doug Peterson, which is a great opportunity for Doug Peterson with the Philadelphia Eagles. They seem to be very, very excited about that. So, listen, people forget, although he changed teams, Andy Reid is the longest tenured head coach in the league. He's not the longest tenured head coach with the same team. That's Bill Belichick. But Andy Reid's been a head coach in this league since 1999. So, and obviously he's now had playoff success with two franchises, the Eagles and the Chiefs. There's only about a handful of guys that have done it with three teams, and only one guy, Bill Parcells, has done it with four teams. Andy just needs to work on that clock management, I guess, a little bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Russell, it's always such a pleasure, and it has been too long. We're going to have to work on that this year. Tell everybody out there where they can find you on social media and find your work. Well,
first things first, Facebook, there's a Pro Football Guru page. Probably more fun for me is Twitter, which is Bax Football Guru. We have quite the following on there. As far as my work, Bleacher Report, NFL Spin Zone, which is growing by leaps and bounds every day, part of Fansided and purchased by the Time Inc. people, about a year ago. The site is really upgraded. Bleacher Report, I think, speaks for itself these days. The fact that I'm able to write for both of them I'm thrilled with the opportunity they've given me the last 3 or 4 years. And then, other things I do around, a few radio shows here and there, and an occasional podcast with my friend Sharona.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, and have a great evening.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Shout out to Russell Baxter for joining me in that last segment. Always great to chat with Russell. Such an encyclopedic knowledge about the National Football League. Great discussion about what happened in the divisional games. Great look at the upcoming conference championship games. This next segment is the final word with Sharona. It is my opportunity to weigh in on topics that are near and dear to my heart. Today's topic is shaming, slut shaming, fat shaming, and it comes to you courtesy of a very disturbing report out of Washington State where a group of young women, teenagers from a high school there, visited the state legislature as part of Teen Lobbying Day to advocate for expanded insurance that might cover birth control. While they were there, they were accosted by a woman legislator who took offense to their lobbying efforts and asked them some rather disturbing questions, including whether or not they were virgins, and even suggested to one of them that she might not be a virgin. This, ladies and gentlemen, is known as slut shaming. It is an offense. I am offended not only that she is a legislator in charge of enacting laws that might impact the rights of women, but that she is a woman and that she is engaging in this type of behavior. It's an affront to womanhood, and she should be ashamed of herself. Slut shaming, fat shaming, we're seeing that rise to the forefront as a topic of conversation. That is a good thing. Slut shaming is a mechanism that is designed to criticize a woman, or it doesn't have to be a woman, but it does impact largely women. It is a way to reduce them to less than citizenship and humanness because of what is perceived to be their sexual activity, whether it's real or not. You see it a lot, as we talk about on this show a lot, when a woman comes forward and accuses a man of an act of sexual violence against her, whether it's rape, sexual assault, or what have you. The automatic response is, what was she wearing? What was she doing? As if wearing something that society deems inappropriate is an excuse for that sort of despicable act to be conducted against them. It is wrong. It is concerning that this type of thought process so often seems to be coming from the Republican Party, which we're going to be talking about how they've been co-opted and how they have been so instrumental in the war on women, in the war to reduce women to less than full citizenship, to second-class citizens, to less than the full rights that every other human being enjoys. Fat shaming, also a big topic of conversation. Amy Schumer has some interesting comments about her career and how she was largely forced to ignore that she didn't fit the image, that Hollywood seems to deem appropriate with, underweight, anorexic-looking young women, mostly getting the lion's share of the parts that call for a female, a gender that would be a woman. Fat shaming, by the way, is an attempt to mock or humiliate someone based on their body status, the fact that their body status is not does not fit that thin caricature of what womanhood should be. It is not, on the other hand, Although the topics can bleed together, no question, the topics can bleed together. I saw it being used in relative situation to Eddie Lacy, who is a running back in the National Football League and whose body has been criticized for being out of shape and overweight and therefore unable to engage in the activity for which he is employed, that is being an in-condition running back, performing at the highest level of his capabilities. It's a bit of a different situation. He is not now in all fairness, a lot of people were making fun of him on social media Saturday night for the food tweets that he has tweeted over the course of his years on social media, on Twitter primarily. But it's not quite the same situation, although it certainly does have that kind of characteristic. Eddie Lacy is more than anything being criticized for lack of performance, not for necessarily how he looks. But it is an interesting conversation, and we're going to continue to have those conversations. Hollywood coming under fire more and more on next week's shows, I should say. I think that we might touch upon the whiteness of the Oscars and the whitewashing of the Oscars and how Hollywood is increasingly coming under fire, rightfully so, for its lack of diversity, the lack of inclusion of diverse candidates, not only in their awards but in other areas, in roles. Women, ageism is very much a big issue, not just in Hollywood, but frankly everywhere else. That's always a good topic of conversation. We'll have to have some more conversations about that as well. It's interesting that society seems to deem that women over the age of 25 are basically useless, and more and more it seems like we worship youth, children, in a way that is rather frightening. All this bleeds into the political discussions, the political debate that we have been promising you that we were going to bring to you on this show. So we're definitely going to do that. I'm going to be having a friend of mine from Twitter, Mike Excalibur. He's going to be coming on the show. Maybe he and I will have that discussion about the Oscars and about diversity in a lot of different areas, particularly Hollywood and other areas. Ben Troop as well is going to be joining me next week, and we'll see who else we can scare up to come on here and have some chats with your girl Sharona. On Thursday, I think I might have said earlier on Friday, but on Thursday it's going to be a super show, supersized Back Talk with Sharona, supersized Sharona with Mark Schofield from Inside the Pylon. Very excited to chat with him. Always a pleasure to interact with him on Twitter. This will be his first time on the show, so we'll welcome him there. We're also going to hopefully have the guys from Feels Like 98, Tennessee Volunteer fan site, we haven't talked about the Tennessee Vols in a while. Some good news for their football program, not so good news for their women's basketball program. Maybe we'll talk about Holly Warlick and the job that she is doing since Pat Summitt has stepped down. And then also we're going to have Matt Stagner. Matt is a writer for Arrowhead Pride. We'll talk about, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a great SB Nation Kansas City Chiefs website, fan site, by the way. Get his thoughts on Andy Reid, perhaps get his thoughts on Doug Peterson to the Eagles, and maybe take a look at the upcoming conference championship games. Happy to welcome Matt to this show. I always like to have new guests come on, new perspectives. Again, diversity is a good thing. Diverse ideas, diverse people. we can all learn a lot from one another. So I'm very excited for Thursday's show. No show on Friday, as I mentioned, because Sharona has places to go and people to see, hopefully heading out to Charlotte not long after that. Stay tuned to my Twitter page for an announcement one way or the other about that. Very excited again about this weekend's games. So that's it for today. You have been listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I am your host. My name is Sharona. As always, I thank you, my listeners, for tuning in. Rest in peace to Glenn Fry. Gone too soon. We lost him. Sad news last night. And to all the other, not just entertainment and music legends, but to everyone that we've lost too soon to cancer and other disabling diseases, or for whatever reason. Life is short. Be kind to one another. We could certainly all stand to be kinder to one another. We live in interesting times. Hate seems to sell more and more. I don't like that. We certainly try to stay away from that on this show. I thank you for tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday. Have a great, great day.